I often want to power up American and Japanese equipment here in the UK. Now for American equipment like this little NTSC video recorder, I'll typically use one of these cheap little step-down transformers. And these basically just output half of the input voltage, so when plugged into the UK's 240 volt main supply, they output around about 120 volts, which is fine for most American equipment. Of course it doesn't convert the frequency, but that doesn't matter for most appliances. Now these things are often marketed as being suitable for Japanese equipment in the UK, but I don't think they are, because Japan uses 100 volts, and the typical 120 volt output from these transformers I think is too high. Okay, yes, for most appliances you'll largely get away with the higher voltage, but it's not going to do the equipment any good, and it will probably shorten its lifespan, so I don't like doing that. And furthermore, it's surprisingly difficult to find step-down transformers that will convert 240 volts to 100 volts. I know Airlink Transformers is one manufacturer in the UK. In fact, even these transformers are designed for 230 volt input, so it outputs about 104, 105 volts when used in the UK. But that's likely to be within tolerance for Japanese equipment, and it's certainly a lot better than 120 volts that you'd get out of a typical US step-down transformer. And I actually don't know of any other suppliers of such transformers. If you do, please let me know in the comments and I'll add a link to the video description. So I typically use a variable transformer, often called a variac, adjusted to output 100 volts to power Japanese equipment here in the UK. Now, a couple of weeks ago I was having a rummage in a nearby waste electrical equipment bin and I found this thing. Yes, it's a small desktop UPS. Not very interesting you might think, but this one has a couple of tricks up its sleeve which make it into an incredibly useful little device. So let's get it plugged in and I'll show you what I mean. It's an Emerson Liebert, or Liebert, or however you pronounce it, GXT-MT Plus UPS unit, and if we turn it on, you can see by default it's configured to output 230 volts, and if we turn on the multimeter, which is just hooked up to the output at the back, it's giving us, okay, a little bit more than 230 volts, about 235.5 volts, but it's within spec at 50 Hertz. Very useful if you want a UPS. However, this thing has a few tricks up its sleeve. If we turn off the output and press and hold the select button, we can change the output voltage. Currently it's set to 220, interestingly. So if I select that first, I can take that down to 208. I can take that down again to 200. Unfortunately, I can't go below 200, it goes back up to 240. So the lowest I can set is 200, which is interesting because if you read the user manual for this device, it says the lowest you can go is 208, but this one goes to 200. So if we now exit the menu and turn the output on again, we can see we're now getting, well, a little bit over, but pretty close to 200 volts, 204 volts. This has changed because I pressed the select button. That's now the input voltage, which is 235. That's actually quite low for this location. It's normally about 242, 243, that kind of range. And that's the battery voltage. That is the output voltage, which is, it's telling me is 200, so I suppose 20, 205, 206 is within tolerance for 200 volt output. Now, if I pass that through this transformer, that will give me pretty close to 100 volts. It'll give me about 104, 105 volts, won't it? And that's well within spec for a Japanese piece of equipment. So that's one useful thing it can do, but another really useful thing it can do is if we turn off the output again, I can go back into the menu, now interestingly, that does always revert back to 230. I don't really know, I don't think it's meant to, I think that's a firmware bug, but every time you go into the menu, the output voltage flicks back to 230 volts. But if we go through the menu options, we have this CF thing, which is currently DIS, meaning disabled. If we select that and enable it, so that is now enabled, if we carry on going through the menu options, we can set the output frequency. It's currently set to 50 Hertz. If we change that, we can change that to 60 Hertz. Lock that in. Go back to 0, which is just to exit the menu. We now have just over 200 volts coming out, but at pretty close to 60 Hertz. So that means this device could be used to power equipment that can only run on the US or sort of part of Japan mains frequency of 60 Hertz. So using this device I can get any mains electrical standard from pretty much any country in the world when combined with a transformer like this. Because although this will only go down to 200 volts, this can then halve it. So there we have the Emerson Liebert GXT MT Plus desktop UPS unit, which when combined with a cheap step-down transformer like this one can be used to generate pretty much any mains power standard from anywhere in the world. A very useful little device. Thank you very much for watching.